Hey guys, Astrogos here. In this first video series, I'll be going in depth with useful guides on how skills can be best utilized or directly efficient with Bannerlord gameplay styles. Today we'll be delving into smithing, how to best level it from start to mid-game, and how to maximize profits using smithing. It's always worth noting, I'm currently on patch 1.0.5. Couple disclaimers before I start. Bannerlord is 100% a sandbox full of amazing routes to take, and smithing is a section which may be unused by a lot of new players like myself. This is my second reroll of Bannerlord. I have not played the original series. Let's jump right into it. Smithing itself is a section of the skill tree that might often be neglected by newer players who may not know the benefits incorporated with it. Some of the positives may include fine, masterwork, or legendary items, profit gain, damage increases with the weapons you make, and of course much more. The smithing system is composed of three main tabs: forging, smelting, and refining. Forging is for crafting your weapons with resources you loot or buy. We'll get more into detail about this further on, but smelting itself is pretty self-explanatory, but this will come in handy if your goal is to reach high levels of smithing. Refining is going to be the main focus of this guide, mostly because it has the highest yield of experience and because it's going to refine a lot of resources you'll need at any given time when you're smithing. Anytime we're doing any of these three options, there's a well thought of stamina system in place to make the process of smithing a grindier one than a straight shot. For example, forging swords with 100 stamina will consume 20 stamina per sword, granting a maximum of 5 swords to be forged in a single day. Each system has its own stamina use, which is why there are different paths than others to grant maximum value for the 100 stamina you have per day. Moving on, let's talk about the skill tree and how it could be approached for a higher experience yield. There is a subset of skills that can benefit smithing. For example, the endurance tree will increase your learning rate of riding, athletics, and smithing all at once. I wouldn't recommend putting all of your points in this if this was your first run through, because it takes a lot of the important skills away, like an intellect or vigor, but at least keep this in mind. Then of course, the actual smithing tree itself. Looking into it, you can see the perks and milestones of levels you commit to, which can actually become very useful in both the long and short of smithing in general. Things like Curious Smelter and Practical Refiner is a great example of this. The best way to incorporate smithing with your gameplay should usually be casually, unless you have a consistent dinar flow, with, of course, trader cities that grant a stable supply of resources. The best method for being able to grind out smithing levels will be stockpiling resources you get from looting caravans, looters, mountain bandits, and the like from the start. I'm emphasizing this because there are so many things to look out for in a fresh character, but saving a few weapons and iron ore shouldn't be too much of a problem when starting and fighting for a kingdom at least. After getting these resources, stop at a trader city, spend a day or two there, and regain your stamina. If you already have charcoal, smelt your weaponry you've looted, assuming it isn't worth a quick buck. If you don't, find a settlement or city that has a reasonable amount of hardwood, buy it, and refine it into charcoal. If you can't seem to find a stable amount of hardwood, it's always worth investing into a perk called Efficient Charcoal Maker. It's the first perk on the tree and it's excellent. It actually grants you a ratio of hardwood to charcoal of 3 to 2 instead of 2 to 1, which is actually pretty huge. Now, of course, these resources you smelt can be used for a variety of things, but for min-max purposes, I've composed a list of the actions which will actually yield you the most experience for a day's worth of stamina. The single most experience you will yield for a day's worth of stamina will be refining Thamaskin. Now, I don't know the pronunciation. It could be Thamaskin, it could be Thamaskine, it's up in the air, but before you get to that point of refining the best material in the game, refining crude iron will probably be your best bet. It's actually lower tier, but it's still working. Of course, this can always be sold after refining for some of your dinars back as well. I should also note that there isn't too much of a cookie-cutter path for your perks to be chosen. There's an opportunity cost for each choice you make in the sandbox world. For me specifically, I chose Efficient Iron Maker instead of Effective Coal Maker, which means I lost out on a pretty huge chunk of charcoal I definitely needed in my campaign specifically. Probably one of the biggest winners for the perk tree though will actually be Practical Refiner. It's achieved at level 125, and this is because refining in its own regard usually has the highest yield of experience normally. Having this will be an effective 50% increase in the amount of experience you achieve per cycle of smithing. I also have a gut feeling that Practical Smith at level 175 actually will grant another 50% increase in smithing in general, amounting to what seems to be an 100% decrease in the amount of stamina needed to refine. Now, if that is the case, it could be game changing and allowing players to be able to get maxed out smithing in just a couple of hours with the right amount of resources available, of course. I can't amount this to like being rewarding maxing smithing or just a simple mistake in the actual tree. But nevertheless, smithing after 175 will be a breeze if you are refining, and I'll definitely make a follow-up video on what the end result is like after 175. But to finish this up in sum, just remember this, guys. Smithing is an excellent way to craft excellent cutting-edge swords, pun intended there, in Bannerlord, and even make a slight profit from doing so. Depending on how endgame you'd like to make it, it's definitely something to look forward to instead of starting off with for newer players like myself. But of course, it's an excellent game in general. The sandbox in this experience is pretty wonderful. I mean, even some things on the smithing tree that I'd like to point out would definitely be the +1 increase in Vigorous Smith. You get that at level 150. There's a couple things that really get out there and stand out to me. And of course, the last thing, which is Legendary Smith. That's a huge one. Creating a legendary weapon, I don't even want to look up the Google searches myself. I just want to craft one. Even a 5% chance, I'll take that risk. But aside from that, guys, that's really everything. I'll make sure to give an update as I get more into this awesome game. Like if you liked it, and have a good one.